Welcome back to Adam versus the Man. I'm very excited to be joined today at the rotunda of the Cannon House office building with none other than Congressman Dr. Ron Paul. Congressman, thank you so much for sitting down with us this morning.
Good to be with you.
So you've described yourself as a voluntarist. Can you tell us what that means for the big picture and what your ideal society would be as a voluntarist?
Voluntary means no coercion. So if you want to change people's habits or change the world, you should do it by setting examples and trying to persuade people to do it. You can use force only when somebody uses force against you. So voluntary use of information and persuading people, I think, is the best way to go, and no matter what kind of problem you're looking at.
Do you think we have a chance of achieving a society based on those ideals in America?
Not soon. We had a relative voluntary society, in our early history, but steadily, even after the Constitution was passed, steadily it was undermined, and it systematically grew. It grew certainly through the 20th century. That is the authoritarian approach, which is the opposite. That is, the government tells us everything we can do and can't do, and then it branches out not only into personal habits, it goes into economic affairs, and then they get bolder and start telling other people in other countries what they should do and shouldn't do. So I think it's been steady in foreign policy. It surely started 100 and some years ago, and Wilson was terrible, and all the presidents have endorsed that principle. And economically, it really came to light during the Depression. They blamed the Depression on capitalism and the gold standard, which was completely false. So therefore, they justified this whole idea that, well, what we need is an authoritarian government, to regulate the economy. And then, of course, they invented this weird approach of if we only had a Federal Reserve System to manipulate money and credit, then we can use this authoritative approach by central economic planning through the Federal Reserve. Of course, the results of that is what we're seeing around the world today.
What do you think is the significance of our generation that seems to be much more inclined to supporting you and your message in coming to power in the next 10, 20 years?
I haven't quite figured it out. I think about it a lot because it's impressive when I go to the campus. We get a large group of young people out, and every time they come to the office, I always ask that question to them: what got your interest up?
And it was on a campus where we first started chanting "End the Fed."
Yeah, and I think it's a combination of things. I think young people tend to be more principled than those who have learned to live with the system, and they like somebody who sticks on principle and has precise answers, and that's attractive to young people. But I think other things has happened too. There's been an educational effort, especially in economics, in the last 10, 15 years, along the lines of the Austrian School of Economics, and Keynesianism now has proven to be a failure, so young people are saying, hey, maybe Keynesianism isn't the correct answer. So I think it's an intellectual thing. But I think the timing also has brought about these significant changes. During the campaign before, I talked about the economic crisis that nobody quite understood was coming, and then the housing bubble burst. And I think that gave us credibility, and people concerned, even those individuals on the receiving end, and say, well, we want more stuff from the government. I think they're worried as much as young people are thinking, holy man, am I going to pay into Social Security for 50 years, probably not get anything? I might not even get a job. Cost of my gasoline's going up. And why are we fighting these wars endlessly? And
I just turned 18 and inherited $45,000 worth of debt.
Yeah, and there's no, I think, I think the burden placed on the young people make them think about this. Those who don't think, I guess, ball games and whatever they do, and they don't think about the issues and thinking that this is going to last forever, they're not interested. But a significant number of people, the young people who are serious about what's happening, I think are looking our way.
You were quoted in a recent story in The Telegraph. The question is, why does our government invite conspiracy theories all the time? Why don't they show a picture? So what's your theory on that? Why does our government invite conspiracy theories all the time?
Governments like secrecy. They're not, whether it's the Federal Reserve or our foreign policy, just think how many times we've gone to war by distortion of the evidence, and lie our way into war, whether it was World War, whether it was Vietnam War, or going into Iraq. I mean, they have to, deceive us. And then when the people distrust the government, then any question in government is called a conspiracy theory. You know, and they do that to say that, oh, you're nuts because everything is a conspiracy. But I think the best thing is you should only believe the conspiracies that are true. You know. Of course there's a conspiracy, people getting together and thinking, well, how are we going to manipulate the money supply? But in an intellectual way, those of us who think that we should have a different system, you know, we sit around and talk, so we conspire, and that's, use the word loosely, we conspire on how we're going to change the world and how we're going to get more people to understand economics. So but it's almost like, why is the government so stupid? If they don't like the conspiracy theaters, why do they set the stage for them?
Speaking of conspiracies for freedom, when I first started studying the monetary policy issue, it seemed to me like there was a showdown coming as the dollar collapses between those who want to move to a global fiat currency and those of us who want freedom in monetary policy. And now just recently we had George Soros with his meeting at Bretton Woods several weeks ago. And then I go back to the 80s when you started this championing this cause for sound money, for getting away from the Federal Reserve System. Do you think that showdown is coming anytime soon?
I think the showdown is inevitable because fiat money doesn't last forever, and it will end. But there's no way to know which month it will occur or which year. When I talked about the financial bubble before and the housing bubble, I didn't know what month it would be. It could have been a year sooner or a year later. And same way with the monetary crisis, because there's a confidence factor in there. As long as it seems like our dollar is working and they're still taking our dollars, China's been willing to take a lot of our dollars. They've had well over $1 trillion, but they're not taking them this amount. They're shrinking their portfolio now of dollars. So, but there's no panic, and they shrink their portfolio slowly and quietly because they don't want to panic, because if you panic out of the dollar crashes. But I think eventually there will come. The end stages of a currency goes rapidly. I think the best thing for the average person to look at will be prices. Whether their grocery shopping is getting too expensive and how much it costs to fill their tank of gas up, how much it costs for their medical care and transportation. These are the kind of things, and when it starts to lower their standard of living because their salaries can't keep up, that is the beginning of a serious crisis. I think we're there. Now, how rapidly it will move in the next 12 months or so, I can't say that, but my guess is that by November next year, the main topic won't be bin Laden. The main topic is going to be how come I'm getting poorer and poorer, and why did Wall Street rip us off because they were too big to fail, and why do they continue to make huge profits at the same time unemployment stays very high and the people who lost their houses haven't gotten their houses back again. I think that'll still be the major issue next year.
Okay, so moving on to the campaign, you're technically still in exploratory mode,
right,
but you're going to be at the presidential debate tomorrow night in South Carolina. Do you ever get tired of explaining to neocons that you're sharing the stage with the difference between a non-interventionist foreign policy and why an interventionist foreign policy is contrary to the ideals of freedom?
Well, I don't get tired of it because I anticipate it's going to take a long time. Somebody said you have to repeat the truth many, many times before it'll be accepted. But their ears are opening now, more so. I think already I notice a difference, that there are better questions. They're paying more attention to the economic theories and the foreign policy of the freedom movement. And I think that is very, very beneficial. So our numbers are growing by leaps and bounds. Not only do we spread our message over the internet, but also many television programs and even the mainstream media now is starting to ask the right questions.
No, it's amazing how much you were disrespected in the 08 campaign, and now at least you're getting taken much more seriously in the mainstream media. It's very exciting to see, but still left out of so many presidential polls. It's frustrating. At the same time, there's still those that are trying to deny you that place of contention. But as president, you've in the past been very supportive of ending the war on drugs. It doesn't have a basis in the Constitution, but if you take office as president, you're going to be presiding over a system where there are hundreds of thousands of people in jail for nonviolent crimes, for drug-related issues, many of them for marijuana possession. Would you pardon those nonviolent offenders?
I think if, yeah, even the states are starting to do a bit of that. because they can't build more prisons. I mean, I think we have more prisoners, either first or second place, than prisoners around the world.
So you're saying you would pardon all nonviolent offenders?
If somebody's in prison, in a federal prison for nonviolence, drug usage, never committed a hard crime, yes, they should be pardoned. They should be let out. I think there's even a way, and when you look at these prisons, even those who deserve some prison, why don't we use the nonviolent people who committed serious fraud problems, and you still think they serve a prison sentence? We could probably do that with some type of house arrest with electronic surveillance, because this prison, that's a big business, and everybody thinks this is just great, but no, a president could do that. He could pardon people who are in prison for nonviolent use of drugs, and some of them have actually used them for medicinal purposes, for taking marijuana when they're receiving cancer therapy. That's really compassionate conservatism when they do that. Now, no, the person should be able to make the choice. At the very most, states should have some, or could have regulations maybe on the use of drugs with children. And that's the way alcohol is used. I think that's not perfect, but we all know that drinking is legal. There's certain ages that are allowed to drink, and you should not and cannot. And there's some pretty stiff penalties if you drink it and kill somebody or cause a serious accident. You can go to prison for a long time, and I think that's the way it should be. But recreational use of drinking wine and doing things like that, or using marijuana for medical reasons. This is I think it's a great example to talk about nullification, because in a way California is nullifying federal court.
Nullifying federal law by getting out with their medical marijuana program.
They're getting out. So the left should be as enthusiastic about nullification as their right.
In general.
So often if you're for states' rights and if you're for nullification, you're a racist. That's what they want to say. But if the left wants to use it, which they do in California, and the left a lot of times will use the regulatory system, because too often conservative Republicans like national regulations, so they only have to lobby Washington and not all the different states for their regulations that may protect them. So they don't like that. So a lot of times I've heard liberals on the House floor, ridicule the right and say, I thought you guys were for states' rights, and they'll say what we need is state regulation when they're tougher than the federal government. I mean, a libertarian might argue against the regulations they're talking about, but that principle should be endorsed by both left and right.
Well, I hope as you go forward and get into debates with more of these neocon chicken house draft dodgers, that you remind them that you're the candidate with the troops on your side. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good to be with you.